While some individuals recall Barack Obama's leadership qualities, others find themselves reminded of why they long for his style of command. It commenced as a simple address, yet it evolved into a lesson that the Trump family would find indelible. Barron Trump sought to ridicule Obama's statements, but shortly thereafter he fell silent. What ensued served as the consummate illustration of poise overcoming arrogance. The day of one of Washington, D.C.'s most anticipated gatherings had arrived, a prestigious leadership symposium attended by international dignitaries, politicians, and business titans. However, what distinguished this occasion was the individuals seated in the front row. Three names that did more than define politics, they divided it. Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Barron Trump. Each of them symbolized something completely distinct. Obama, tranquil, methodical, the voice of diplomacy. Trump, boisterous, direct, the symbol of power and confrontation. And Barron, youthful, confident, still discovering his own voice but bearing a surname that resonated through every headline in America. The hall was filled, the atmosphere crackling with anticipation. Reporters whispered predictions, photographers fine-tuned their camera equipment, and attendees kept glancing toward the platform. Everyone understood that with these three in one room, something significant was destined to occur. The stage backdrop glowed in red, white, and blue. Flags lined the auditorium, and golden lights reflected off polished floors. The host, a prominent political analyst, ascended to the microphone and gave a nervous smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "please welcome our first speaker, the former President of the United States, Barack Obama." The audience erupted in enthusiastic applause. Some stood, others clapped softly, but everyone leaned forward. Then, from the edge of the stage, Barack Obama walked forward, tall, composed, and unhurried. He was not required to speak a single word. His presence conveyed the entire message. He gave a slight nod to the crowd and commenced speaking. "Thank you," he expressed. "It is good to see so many faces here, leaders, visionaries, and young individuals poised to shape what comes next." His tone was inviting, deliberate, like someone having a genuine conversation, not delivering an address, the kind of tone that naturally draws you in. He paused for a brief moment, surveyed the environment, and proceeded. "I want to address something fundamental, something we all experience even if we do not consistently articulate it. The cost of living, the price of groceries, rent, gasoline, it is impacting millions of households, good, industrious Americans." The auditorium became profoundly quiet. One could distinctly hear the hum of the climate control system. Obama continued, "Nearly 62% of Americans are struggling to keep pace. Inflation isn't just a figure on a graphical representation. It is the reason parents forgo an evening meal so their children can eat. It is the reason families anxiously hold their breath every time an invoice arrives." The audience listened intently. Some nodded their heads, others whispered softly to each other. Even those who did not support him could not refute that his words truly hit home. Obama's tone grew firmer. "But here's the crucial element," he asserted. "Leadership is not about directing blame towards the previous administration or the one on the horizon. Leadership is about taking a stand right at this moment and asking, what can we achieve together to remedy this?" A wave of applause filled the auditorium. Obama smiled faintly, took a slight sip of water, and proceeded. He spoke about collaborative effort, about governmental accountability, about compassion. He referenced no individual by name, yet everyone was aware that the specter of contemporary politics hovered over his utterances. In the front row, Donald Trump sat motionless, arms crossed, eyes fixed intensely on Obama. His jaw was clenched, his expression did not alter, but that silence articulated far more than words ever could. Beside him was Barron, tall, serious, his phone resting face down upon the table. He appeared calm yet inquisitive. This was one of those instances where historical legacy and present reality intersected in real time. Obama concluded his address with a phrase that elicited quiet admiration from the entire room. He stated, "A magnificent nation does not ascend simply because one individual triumphs. It arises when every man and woman stands united, even during challenging periods." He paused briefly, looked up, and then added, "Leadership is not about pointing fingers. It is about lifting a helping hand." That was it. The audience clapped loudly and for an extended period. Some stood once more. Even individuals from opposing political factions could not help but show their appreciation. Obama stepped back slightly, nodding in acknowledgement. The camera lights flickered as photographers captured the moment, the former president looking composed and reflective, the quintessence of quiet assurance. But while the room celebrated the moment, a storm was quietly formulating in the front row. President Trump inclined slightly toward his son. No one was able to hear what he muttered, but Barron smirked faintly for just a single second. Trump's gaze remained focused on Obama, and his expression hardened noticeably. He tapped his finger upon the table as if awaiting his opportunity. He was not the sort of man to sit silently after hearing something of that nature, and everyone knew it. The host returned to the microphone, again smiling nervously. "Thank you, President Obama," he said. "That was a powerful message." The applause slowly subsided. The sound of clapping faded, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. And then, with the faintest trace of tension in his voice, the host announced, "Next, we will hear from President Donald J. Trump." Obama took his seat. Trump stood up, buttoned his jacket, and adjusted his tie. He smiled, but it was not a cordial smile. It was the kind of grin that said, "Now it is my turn." The audience waited. Cameras pointed in his direction. Reporters raised their writing implements. Trump leaned towards the microphone. The lights reflected off the podium as he cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice was sharp, confident, and unmistakable. And just like that, the entire mood in the room completely reversed itself. The applause was gone, the politeness had evaporated, and something far more personal was about to commence. Because what began as a respectful event was about to transform into a heated confrontation between two presidents and one son, who had absolutely no concept of how far things were about to escalate. The applause had only just concluded. People were still conversing quietly about Obama's words, the empathy, the calm, the quiet assurance. However, at the front of the hall, one individual was not clapping, President Donald Trump. He sat motionless, his gaze locked intensely on Obama. His jaw was tight, his face unreadable, but you could almost sense the internal storm gathering. He glanced toward his right at Barron and leaned closer. The cameras could not capture what he whispered, but Barron gave a swift nod. Then Trump straightened his tie, adjusted his jacket, and stood up. The host's nervous voice came through the microphone. "Now please extend a welcome to the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump." The applause this time was hesitant, polite, yet cautious. Everyone understood what could occur when Trump had a microphone in his hand. He walked to the podium deliberately, absorbing the attention. Flashbulbs burst like lightning across the auditorium. His every footstep resonated with authority. Trump stood there for a moment, surveying the audience. Then he offered that signature half-smirk, half-dare smile and leaned into the microphone. "Well," he began, his tone laced with sarcasm, "that was quite a speech, wasn't it?" A few people chuckled nervously, others just waited. They recognized that tone. Trump continued, "You know, Barack discusses a great deal about unity, about togetherness, about how we should all shoulder the burden. Sounds quite agreeable, doesn't it?" He paused, his voice dropping slightly and growing sharper. "But here's the simple truth. The problems people face today did not simply materialize from thin air. They did not commence last year or even the year prior. They began when he was in command." The room became motionless. Trump was not gently easing into this. He was plunging directly into conflict. He turned towards the crowd, pointing slightly for emphasis. "People cannot afford groceries, gasoline prices are exceptionally high, families are suffering, and you know who constructed that foundation? Obama." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters began jotting down notes. Cameras zoomed in tightly on Obama's face, calm, expressionless. Trump pressed onward, his voice booming. "You discuss leadership, Barack, but leadership means assuming responsibility, and you never did that. You speak about assisting individuals, yet people are still hurting because of the mess you left behind." Some in the crowd clapped, others sat frozen, uncertain if they were witnessing a speech or a verbal altercation. Obama did not budge. He did not interrupt. He simply leaned back, his hands folded, his face tranquil, almost too tranquil. Trump looked around, pacing slightly behind the podium. Inflation, unemployment, chaos at the border, all of it traces back to your poor decisions. You talk about listening to people. I have been listening, and what they are saying is that they are exhausted. He struck the final words forcefully, allowing them to hang in the air. The host shifted awkwardly in his seat. A few individuals whispered, but Trump was not finished. "You know," he stated, "when I assumed office, I promised to fix what was broken, and in spite of all the resistance, despite the constant attacks, we did things differently. We told the truth, even when people did not appreciate it." He turned his head slightly, glancing at Obama. "We did not stand here pretending everything was fine." The words dripped with sarcasm. Obama's expression did not alter, but you could sense the gravity of the moment. Every eye in the room moved between the two men, one calm, the other fiery. Trump leaned closer to the microphone again. "See, Barack enjoys sounding thoughtful, but talk is cheap, and while he talks, people struggle. While he talks, families lose their homes. While he talks, America pays the price." The statement landed like a forceful blow. A few in the audience clapped vigorously, some booed softly. The division in the room was visible, half standing with Trump's assertiveness, half uncomfortable with his directness. But Trump thrived on that tension. He drew energy from it. He smiled slightly and said, "You can deliver speeches all day, you can sound articulate, you can say the precise words, but if you do not deliver results, those words signify nothing." The crowd reacted once more, louder this time. Trump appeared proud, confident. For a moment, it felt like he had captured control of the entire room, but one individual was not moved in the slightest. Obama sat quietly, still calm and collected. He looked at Trump, nodded once, and gave a faint, knowing smile, the kind that said, "Go ahead. I have seen this previously." That small smile altered the energy completely. The camera caught it, and it spread across the large screen in the hall. The audience took notice. Trump noticed, too. His smile faded for a brief second. The power dynamic in the room shifted. The applause ceased. The whispering started again. Trump took a step backward, glanced toward Barron, then back at the crowd. And then in one quick movement, he turned the microphone towards his son. "Barron," he stated, "you have something to say, don't you?" Barron looked surprised, almost uncertain, but his father's gaze informed him that this was not a question, it was a cue. Barron leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and cleared his throat. The audience fell completely silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking. A few seconds elapsed, long, heavy seconds. Then Barron spoke. His tone was calm but cold, confident but cutting. And in just 9 seconds, he said something that would completely alter the direction of the entire event. But what emerged from Barron Trump's mouth next was not simply unexpected. It was the spark that would ignite the largest confrontation of the night and leave both Trump and his son utterly speechless. For a few seconds, the room was frozen in silence. Every eye in that grand hall shifted toward one person, Barron Trump. He sat there at the edge of his seat, tall and composed, but behind that calm face you could perceive the pressure. His father had just handed him the spotlight in front of the world, and now everyone waited to see what the youngest Trump would do. He leaned forward slightly, adjusted the microphone, and took a slow breath. The entire hall was silent. No whispers, no phones, no movement. The silence was thick enough to feel. Then, with a faint smile, Barron began to speak. "Well," he remarked, his tone calm but laced with a hint of sarcasm, "I suppose we all appreciate a good speech about unity and compassion, particularly from someone who spent years dividing the country." A few people gasped, a few clapped nervously. Obama did not move. He remained seated, steady, eyes focused on Barron. Barron continued, his voice stabilizing as he went on. "My dad always says leadership is about truth, and sometimes the truth isn't pleasant. Sometimes it's about asking questions that others are too afraid to pose. Then came the statement that made the entire hall hold its breath. He declared, and some people still wonder if every president was even born to lead this country. A shock went through the audience like a wave. It was swift, barely 9 seconds, but the meaning was unmistakable. He was referring to the old ugly claim regarding Obama's birth certificate, the same rumor that had stirred controversy years prior. And now, standing in front of Obama himself, Barron had brought it back. Trump smiled slightly, proud and satisfied, but the rest of the room did not smile. Some guests looked shocked. Others stared at their tables, trying to avoid being caught reacting. The host froze in his chair, unsure whether to intervene. The atmosphere had changed completely. Obama sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Barron. No anger, no surprise, just silence. The kind that says, I am choosing my moment. Barron looked around, clearly relishing the attention. For a brief second, he'd said something bold, something his father would approve of. He leaned back slightly, folded his hands, and glanced toward his father for validation. Trump gave a firm nod like a commander pleased with his soldier. But across the room, you could feel the discomfort growing heavier by the second. Obama finally broke the silence, not with words, but with a small smile. It was not a mocking smile. It was not even defensive. It was that calm, knowing smile that Obama had perfected over the years, the kind that made people wonder what he was thinking. A few rows back, someone whispered, "He's not going to take that, is he?" But Obama did not move, not yet. He took a slow breath, folded his arms, and waited. That wait, that pause, was powerful. It made people lean forward in their seats, wondering what would come next. Trump, observing Obama's calm, mistook it for weakness. He turned to the audience and stated, "You see, that is what I mean." No answer, no defense, just words. He laughed softly. Barron smiled again. But that laughter would not last, because behind that calm expression, Obama was ready, prepared to turn this entire moment around. After what felt like a full minute of silence, Obama stood up. He did not rush, he did not frown. He simply walked to the microphone. The room fell completely silent once more. Even the sound crew stopped adjusting their headsets. Obama looked out over the audience, then directly at Barron. His voice was calm, low, and precise. "I have been in politics a long time," he began. "I have heard a lot of things, some smart, some not so smart. But I will tell you this, mocking someone's story never makes your own story stronger." He turned toward Trump for a brief moment. "Repeating the same old lines does not make them any more true." Then he faced Barron again, his expression gentle but firm. "You see, son, what you just did, it is not confidence, it is imitation. You have picked up your father's tone, but not his experience, and that is a dangerous mix." The air in the room tightened. Every word hit like a slow drum beat. Obama continued, his voice steady but sharper now. "Let me ask you something, Barron. You question where I come from, but do you even know where you originate from? Are you simply a flawless duplication of your father without your own unique identity?" The line hit the room like lightning. Gasps echoed across the hall. Cameras snapped. Heads turned. Barron froze. His face lost color. He looked at his father, but Trump did not utter a word. Obama stood there, silent again, giving the weight of his words time to sink in. Barron's mouth opened slightly as if to answer, but nothing emerged. Trump's eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. The calm in his expression vanished. He leaned over to Barron and muttered something under his breath, sharp and low. Then, in a louder voice that carried across the stage, he said, "Go wait in the car." The audience gasped again. Barron hesitated, looking around awkwardly before slowly getting up from his seat. Every step he took toward the exit echoed through the hall. Obama did not gloat, he did not smirk. He just stood there, composed, calm, and almost fatherly. When Barron finally disappeared behind the curtain, the silence lingered like smoke. Trump's face turned red with anger. He raised his hand toward the microphone, ready to respond. But Obama spoke first. He said softly, When families turn insults into habits, they forget what respect looks like. And when respect disappears, so does leadership. The words were simple, but their meaning was devastating. Trump froze. The audience was dead silent. No one dared move. Obama stepped back from the microphone, letting his words echo in the stillness. Then, with one calm nod, he returned to his seat. That moment, 9 seconds of mockery followed by a masterclass in composure, would become the defining moment of the night. Obama had not raised his voice once. He did not insult. He did not shout. He simply reminded everyone in that room and everyone watching later that real power does not need noise. It just needs control. The silence after Barron's exit felt endless. You could almost hear the air moving in that grand hall, a space filled with tension, shock, and disbelief. President Trump sat there stiff as a statue, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on Obama. For the first time that evening, the power in the room had shifted. Obama did not move immediately. He sat there with his hands folded, waiting for the weight of what just happened to settle. And then, in his trademark calm voice, he began to speak. "You know," Obama said, turning slightly toward the audience, "when I was president, I faced criticism every single day, some fair, some not. That is part of leadership. But I learned something important. You cannot answer every insult. Sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could." The crowd listened closely. Trump, still visibly angry, leaned forward, ready to interrupt. But Obama raised a hand gently, never breaking his composure. "But tonight," Obama continued, "I think there is something we all just witnessed that is worth talking about." He turned his gaze toward Trump's empty right side where Barron had been sitting moments earlier. The moment your son repeated a line meant to divide, meant to question someone's place in this country, I realized something. This isn't just about politics anymore. It is about what kind of lessons we pass down. The crowd grew quiet again, not daring to miss a single word. Obama looked at the audience, then back at Trump. "You see, when a child mocks instead of asking questions, it is not his fault alone. It is a reflection of what he has been taught, and that is the danger of anger that is never checked. It spreads." Trump shifted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable now. Obama took a slow breath and continued. "I have seen this pattern before. The personal attacks, the mockery, the distractions. It is always the same playbook. It started with you, Mr. President. It went through Ivanka, Melania, and now your son." A murmur moved through the audience. People leaned forward, eyes wide. Obama's tone was calm, but every word landed like a heavy stone. Then, in one of the most unforgettable moments of the night, Obama looked directly at Trump and said, "Families are supposed to lift each other higher, but what happens when the family itself becomes the stage for attack?" Trump's expression changed. For the first time, he did not have a ready comeback. Obama paused, letting that question hang in the air. Then he turned to the audience again. "You know, Jasmine Crockett once said something powerful," Obama continued. "She stated, 'Truth does not disappear just because someone refuses to look at it.'" Mais. Nay. Nee. Crockett made the crowd shift again. Who she was. Fierce congresswoman known for standing her ground and bringing evidence when others brought noise. Obama continued smoothly, his words cutting but controlled. She presented proof, real proof about certain connections, certain behaviors within powerful families, proof that made people uncomfortable. The room tensed. Trump's expression hardened. Obama's tone softened slightly. "I do not repeat rumors. I stick to facts. But the truth is, when powerful men treat women, even their own daughters, as objects of flattery or comparison, something is deeply wrong." Gasps echoed. Everyone knew what he was referring to. Obama looked out into the crowd, his voice steady and almost sorrowful. "In 2006, you said, and I quote, 'If Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.' That is not leadership. That is not pride. That is a man confusing love with vanity." Trump's eyes widened, furious but speechless. Obama took a step back, giving the audience a moment to process his words. The room was still, but it was electric, the kind of silence that feels louder than any noise. Leadership, Obama said finally, is not about mocking. It is about mentoring. It is not about tearing down someone else's name. It is about building your own with dignity. He turned again, facing the crowd. His voice grew softer, warmer, the way only Obama could deliver a message that both cut and healed at the same time. When we raise our children, whether they live in the White House or in a one-bedroom apartment, we teach them by example. If all they see is bitterness, that is what they will become. If all they hear is anger, that is the language they will speak. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the hall. But if they see respect, even toward those who disagree with you, then they learn what true strength looks like. By now, even those who came as Trump supporters were silent. They were not watching a debate anymore. They were watching a lesson. Obama finished his water, set the glass down, and smiled faintly. "Tonight I am not here to win an argument," he said. "I am here to remind everyone, including the next generation, that leadership isn't about being right all the time. It is about being real." And he looked straight at Trump one last time, because when power turns into pride and pride turns into cruelty, that is when a nation starts to lose its heart. The crowd broke into quiet applause at first, hesitant, almost afraid of what might happen next. Then it grew louder, rising into thunderous clapping. Trump sat there stone-faced, his hands tightened on the armrests, his face red with frustration. But he could not speak, not yet. Because deep down, even he knew the moment he said a word, he would lose the room completely. Obama gave a small nod of thanks, stepped back from the podium, and walked calmly toward the exit. No mic drops, no shouting, just quiet strength. As he left the stage, cameras followed him. Behind him, Trump remained seated, motionless. The image said everything words could not. One man had shouted, the other had talked, and only one had left with his dignity intact. As Barack Obama walked off that stage, the atmosphere felt unreal. People were not cheering wildly or shouting, they were simply quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that comes when everyone knows they have just witnessed something rare. A moment of truth. Obama did not look back. His steps were calm, his expression unshaken. Each stride toward the exit seemed to echo louder than applause. The cameras followed him, the lights catching his face, steady, composed, and dignified. He did not wave. He did not need to. His silence spoke more than 1,000 sound bites ever could. Meanwhile, President Trump remained seated at the front, still frozen in disbelief. His son, Barron, had not returned. His supporters looked uneasy, whispering to one another but not daring to speak too loudly. And for the first time in a long while, Trump was not commanding the moment. Obama was. Even as he exited the room, he was still leading the energy of it. It was power without volume, control without force, respect without demand. That is what made the moment so hauntingly powerful. Outside the hall, the cool night air met Obama as he stepped through the double doors. Reporters waited, dozens of them, microphones in hand, hoping for a reaction. But Obama simply smiled, raised a hand politely, and said, "Good evening, everyone. Let us all take a breath." Then he got into his car and left. No extra words, no gloating, just class. Back inside, the event was still in quiet shock. The host, unsure of what to say, finally stood and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for President Obama." And once again, the entire hall rose to their feet, not out of loyalty, but out of respect. Even those who did not agree with him found themselves clapping. Trump looked around, realizing the tide of the room had completely turned. He leaned toward the host, whispered something, then stood up and walked off stage without another word. Later that night, clips of the event spread quickly. But what stayed in people's minds was not the argument or the controversy. It was the way Obama ended it, gracefully, calmly, without throwing a single insult. And that is what made it unforgettable. In the following days, journalists, political analysts, and ordinary citizens all reflected on that night. Some praised Obama's composure, Others criticized Trump's reaction. But the one takeaway that everyone agreed on was how much that moment said about character. Because in that hall, under those bright lights, people did not just see a clash between two presidents. They saw a father, a son, and a man who reminded them that leadership is more than titles or power. It is about self-control. Obama later spoke briefly at a small community event, and when someone asked him about what happened that night, he smiled and said, "Sometimes the loudest lesson comes from the quietest response." That line would be repeated for days. It struck a chord. You see, Obama's message was not just aimed at the Trumps. It was for everyone watching, for the parents raising children in a world full of noise, for the young people trying to find their voice in a crowd of shouting, for the leaders, both current and future, who confuse control with compassion. He wanted people to see that true strength is not about domination. It is about understanding. It is about knowing when to stand your ground and when to step back with grace. That is why, when he turned that question on Barron, "Are you truly your own person or just a flawless duplicate?" It was not cruelty. It was a mirror, a reflection of what happens when imitation replaces identity. Obama did not need to humiliate anyone to win the moment. He just exposed the truth, calmly, deliberately, and with complete command. As for Barron, he reportedly stayed quiet for days after the event. No public comments, no interviews. And maybe that silence was not defeat. Maybe it was reflection. Because every young person makes mistakes, the question is, do they learn from them? And that was the deeper message Obama wanted everyone to take home that night. When the world tests your patience, when someone mocks you or questions you, do not let anger lead the way. Pause. Breathe. Answer with dignity, because the moment you let someone else control your emotions, you give them your power. That is what made Obama's calm so devastating that night. While others shouted, he listened. While others attacked, he taught. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that true leadership does not shout to be heard. It earns silence out of respect. As the lights dimmed in that Washington hall and the night came to an end, the image that stayed burned in people's minds was not the confrontation, it was the contrast. Trump's anger versus Obama's calm, Barron's mockery versus Obama's grace, and that quiet walk off the stage. A man who did not just win an argument, but won the room. And that brings us to the heart of the story. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what name you carry, respect is never outdated. Dignity never goes out of style. And the calmest person in the room, that is usually the one in control. Obama's final act that night was not about revenge. It was about reminding everyone watching that true leadership does not need to shout. It simply needs to stand tall, stay kind, and walk away with grace.